Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to our program this afternoon. I'm Michael Bryant, and I serve here in the Whitfield Center for Christian Leadership at Charleston Southern. We're privileged this afternoon to be hosting the Honorable Judge John W. Kittridge from the South Carolina Supreme Court, and he has served on the court in this capacity since 2008. Just a little bit of background information about him, but he'll certainly tell us some more in just a moment. He has also served on the Court of Appeals, the Circuit Court, and also the Family Court. He is admitted to practice in various courts across the country, some which include the U.S. Court of Military Appeals and the United States Supreme Court. He was born in Greenville, North Carolina in 1956, and he later graduated from USC School of Law in 1982. He is married to Lila, and he has 3 adult children, Lila, Marion, Will, and Zay, and also has 2 grandchildren. And we're honored to have you with us here this afternoon.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And one of the primary reasons why we wanted to have you join us this afternoon is because here at CSU, we're very passionate about graduating servant leaders, those who serve others in whatever discipline God calls them to serve in after graduation. And so we're talking primarily today to students, and we're primarily concerned about leadership. Of course, we'll probably talk about things not directly related to leadership, but we're very much interested in leadership, specifically justice, the leadership that you show in your capacity. And so without further ado, I just want to get to our questions, so you'll have plenty of time to address these. Begin just by telling us a little bit about yourself. Tell us some things about yourself that I haven't already shared.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. First of all, sir, thank you for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be with you and your students and other staff and others who may be participating. And I want to commend you on your mission. I went and read the website and tried to study as much as I could about your program, and it's very commendable. Hopefully, I live my life to embrace an attitude or a view of servant leadership. And I hope that that's my mission, not only today, but tomorrow and all the tomorrows that I have left. About me briefly, I was blessed to have 2 wonderful parents. My dad died many years ago. My mom is still alive, and she'll be 98 in May. As you noticed, born and raised here in Greenville, South Carolina. I attended University of South Carolina, both undergraduate and law school. Married to my wife, Lila. This June will mark 40 years, 3 children, all doing well. Very proud of all of them. Love them very much, and have 2 wonderful grandchildren. So that's sort of a snapshot of me and my background.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you're talking to students today, some who probably have a familiarity with the justice system, probably most don't. Could you just begin by talking about what the South Carolina Supreme Court is? What types of cases does it typically hear? And then why is it important?
Thank you, sir. Well, let me first begin by just telling you what courts do. Courts resolve disputes. That's why courts exist, to resolve disputes. It could be disputes between 2 individuals. It could be a dispute between the government and an individual. It could be between corporations or an individual and a corporation. It runs the whole gamut. But that's the overarching essence of what the legal system is designed to do, to facilitate the resolution of disputes. There's a state court system and there's a federal court system, and they look very much alike. In both systems, state and federal, there are trial courts and there are appellate courts. When a case begins, it starts out in the trial court. And in a trial court is where a case is originally decided. In a trial court, you usually can have a jury trial or not, but you call witnesses, you present your case, and you hope for the best. And at the end of the trial, there is generally a winner and a loser. And the appellate court is there to address any errors that may have occurred. And I can tell you, just out of human nature, that whoever loses in the trial court never thinks it was a fair trial. Whoever loses thinks it was a raw deal, life's unfair, the system's unfair, the judge didn't know what he or she was doing, and the list of excuses goes on and on. So the losing party will then consider whether to appeal. And in both the federal and state system, there are two levels of appeals. There's an intermediate court of appeals, and then there's a Supreme Court. Of course, on the federal side, I'm sure as you and your students are aware, the United States Supreme Court consists of 9 justices. In South Carolina, we have 5 justices, and I'm fortunate to serve as one of those 5. When we hear a case, we don't hear witnesses. There are no juries. We simply receive briefs, legal arguments in writing, prepared by the attorneys. Sometimes the parties themselves will participate and do it. In many cases, we'll have argument where they'll come to the courtroom and make their legal argument. It's usually half an hour, 45 minutes, no more than an hour. And we will then conference the cases, the 5 of us on the Supreme Court, and we'll make a decision. So what kind of cases do we hear? At the appellate level, we hear all kinds of cases. Civil cases, it can be a motor vehicle accident, it can be a property line dispute, it can be a medical malpractice case, it can be a breach of contract. And on the criminal side, it's everything from A to Z, from a minor traffic violation to a death penalty case. And why is the Supreme Court of South Carolina important? It's true with every other state Supreme Court. On matters of state law, we are the end of the road as far as the law is concerned. There's no further appeal on a state law question. We might be wrong, but there's no further review. Now, if a federal question is involved, the losing party can ask the U.S. Supreme Court to hear the case, but it's a matter of discretion, not a matter of right. Let me make one final comment before we go to the next question, if that's okay, Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, in a trial court, there's one judge. And as you go up in the system, the number of judges increases. Both the state and federal system have what are called intermediate courts of appeals. And they sit in panels. In South Carolina, we have 9 Court of Appeals judges, but they sit in panels of 3. So 3 will hear the case. When it comes to the state Supreme Court, 5 will hear the case. So the question is, why, as you move up in the appellate level, are there an increasing number of judges? And the reason is this: we want to get it right. Mm-hmm. And we know that trial courts, not purposely, but inadvertently, are going to make mistakes. And we as appellate judges will make mistakes. But when we work together with colleagues, be it 3, like the Court of Appeals, or 5 on the state Supreme Court, by collaborating and working together, the chances of making that error are less. We want to get the right result. And so by increasing the numbers, we are hoping by design that we'll get the right result the law requires.
Okay, very good. Just a point of clarification. Did I hear you right? The actual individual or parties who may have been involved in a situation, you don't see them, but you may see their lawyers, right?
Well, we'll see the parties too. They are welcome to come to the courtroom. Occasionally, the lawyers will be proceeding what we call pro se. The client, the litigant, won't have a lawyer. They represent themselves. So they have to prepare the brief and they have to come and argue. Now, is that common? No, but it does occur because in our justice system, the equal opportunities for everyone to have their day in court, whether you're represented by counsel or you represent yourself.
Okay, very good. How did you reach your current leadership role? How does someone become a justice on the South Carolina Supreme Court? What does that process look like? Could you talk about your journey?
Well, the process is you have to have been a lawyer for X number of years, a citizen of the state, certain amount of experience. You go through a vetting process through a body called the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. It's a very thorough review of your qualifications, both personal and professional. And that body will then make a determination if you're qualified to go to the next level and have your candidacy considered by the South Carolina General Assembly. And then in a joint session of the House and the Senate in South Carolina, 170 members, one about 124 in the House and 46 in the Senate, then a joint assembly, they'll decide, and by majority vote, that is the winner. Now, as for me personally, I did not set out to become a judge. Set of circumstances that requires too long an explanation for this format just fell into place for me. And I think it'd be just more appropriate to say that life is best understood through the rear view mirror. As I look back, I can see God's hand on my life. I can see him working in my life. And I, like everyone else, you deal with good things in life and you deal with bad things in life, and you learn to navigate. And even when you're in the midst of some things that appear at the time to be very negative, you learn from them and you grow from them. And on the back end of those experiences, you better understand with clarity God's leading hand and presence in your life. And so I did not set out to become a judge or a justice on the Supreme Court, but as I look back at my life's journey, I can very much see God's hand guiding me in that process.
Very good. Has someone or have several people served as a role model for you in particular? And if so, how so?
I've been so blessed. I have so many friends, and I've had what I consider to be great friends and mentors. I can think of Sunday school teachers who link their worldview to the Bible, and the Bible, so to speak, becomes their manual for life, and great Bible teachers. I can think of former bosses I had. One, when I first got out of law school, hired me as a law clerk. He was a judge, Judge Billy Wilkins of Greenville. I then went to work for his family firm, became very close to the family, and particularly the senior partner, David Wilkins, who meant and still means a great deal to me. I've been blessed with great colleagues that I've worked on in the various courts, and even today at the state Supreme Court. So I feel like I've had many mentors that I've had the privilege of working with and being influenced by.
Okay. What makes an effective justice? What makes a good justice? And what I mean by that is, are there certain characteristics or traits or skills or even attitudes that you think makes a particularly good justice?
Well, I'll try to answer that question on several levels, and I'm going to segue back to my previous answer. I have tried to emulate and learn from those people that God has put in my path, former bosses, colleagues, and friends. And if I do not emulate their character traits and what they taught me and how they influenced me, then I really legitimately could not say they mentored me. If I don't mirror what they taught me, then I question whether I can call them a mentor in the first instance. And the things I've learned along that path and from these influential people in my life are not simply limited to helping me be a better member of the legal profession. Hopefully, they have taught me and helped me to be a better person in every sphere of my life, be it in my job, my personal life, in the marketplace, wherever I find myself. And those characteristics, again, are not limited to the legal profession. And I would submit to you and your fellow students that those characteristics hold true in any area of life. It's to study hard, it's to work hard, and it's to be a good listener. And a verse that's always resonated with me that I tried to teach my children is from James 1:19, to be swift to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. I think listening is a lost art, and I think being an effective listener and a good listener is very much a part of being a servant leader. I work on an appellate court with 4 other colleagues who I consider friends. We must collaborate in making the decision we think is correct under the law. I will tell you that I listen very carefully to their points of view. And in doing so, I think I earn the right for them to listen to my point of view. So being a good listener I think is critical to that equation. And listening not only in a professional way, but a personal way as well.
Very good. Well, you've served on the South Carolina Supreme Court since 2008, and during that time, I'm sure that you've heard a number of cases, you've dealt with a number of cases. Are there one or two cases that stand out to you that are particularly interesting that you would like to discuss and tell us why they're interesting to you or why you think they're meaningful?
Dr. Bryan, I get that question quite often. And I hope you don't view this as rude, but I'm not going to answer it directly.
Okay, it's okay.
I want to tell you why. I remember some cases, and I could specifically answer that case. But what I want to communicate to your students is that every case is important. And if you or any of your students have ever been involved in a case, I can tell you to them, that's the most important case in the world. So as a judge, I want to make sure that I do my very best in every case that comes before me. I made a reference earlier on the criminal side of the court that we hear cases from a traffic ticket to the death penalty. Now, in the abstract, one would readily say, and understandably, that the death penalty case where someone's life is on the line is far more important. But I can tell you, to the person who got a speeding ticket, who has taken the time and effort and expense to appeal it to the state Supreme Court, thinks his or her case is important. And I want to give that case its just due and let that person know and understand that I and my colleagues are giving that case every proper consideration. And people who come into the legal system have an absolute right to expect to be heard, to be listened to in a meaningful way, and to be respected and treated fairly. And if a judge does not give each case his or her full attention and do so with respect, confidence in our justice system will collapse. So yes, I can remember specific cases that still stay with me to this day, but the overarching point that I've learned through the years is to each litigant, his or her case is the most important. And I try to honor that by giving each case its proper consideration.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Can you talk for a moment about some ways that your profession has changed since you began serving either on the South Carolina Supreme Court or even, back to when you first began practicing law? Just want to get the students a perspective as far as how maybe your profession has changed or stayed the same.
The profession has changed dramatically. I've been out of law school almost 40 years. And just to give you one example that I think illustrates the nature of the change is in our system under the Constitution, specifically the 7th Amendment, there's a right to a jury trial. And I think there's this belief out there that almost every case goes to a jury trial. Jury trials are very rare these days. Very rare. And I think people would be very surprised to see the actual number of the decline in jury trials through the years. So are cases being filed? Absolutely. But they're being resolved in other ways. And they're being resolved without juries. Very often cases are resolved through what's called mediation. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's arbitration. And many times with arbitration, it's not voluntary in a pure sense, because people will sign unknowingly a lengthy contract that requires any dispute to go to arbitration. I'd venture to say that the people listening today all have a cell phone. And at some point they went to the store and they purchased a cell phone. And they were presented electronically, or perhaps it was printed, but they signed the form. And unbeknownst to them, there's an arbitration agreement in that document. So if they have a dispute with their cell phone provider, they're not going to court. they're going to an arbitration forum to resolve that dispute. So yes, the law resolves disputes, but the jury trial is not as common as it once was. I think it's probably a discussion for another day, whether that's good or bad, but that's just the reality. So the legal profession itself has had to adapt and adjust to the changing nature of the profession. The method of resolving disputes is less frequently by a jury and more frequently by other means of dispute resolution.
Okay, very good. Can you talk for a moment about how character or ethics is important for your profession? And was there ever a specific time, is there ever a time that comes to mind when it was essential that you showed strong ethics?
Dr. Bryant, that's a great question. And the answer, like I've said in response to other excellent questions you've posed, is not limited to the legal profession. And I think it has broad application. Character and ethics is not something that's on the periphery of an individual. It's not some adjunct or something that we put under our description of qualifications or our skill set. Character and ethics, I believe, serve as our core. They define who we are. Either we have strong character and good ethics, or we do not. And the idea that ethics can change from situation to situation, we can justify things we do, that may be a popular narrative in today's increasing secular culture, but to me, it doesn't hold true for any length of time. Let me give you an example that we deal with as judges. As judges, we take an oath. My oath is to follow the law. And there will be many times, it's happened before, it'll happen again. It's a fairly regular occurrence. A judge will be looking at a case and a judge will think to himself or herself, gosh, I sure wish the result were X, because I believe in X, whatever X may be. But you look at the law and the law says, no, the answer is not X, the answer is Y. Well, what's the judge to do? To impose his or her personal philosophy or view and do X? Or to put his or her viewpoint aside and honor his or her oath to follow the law? That's a tension and a crossroads that a judge confronts on a regular basis. And a judge, if he or she is true to the oath of office, will not do X, but will put his or her viewpoint aside and follow the law and do Y, whatever Y is under the circumstances. So to me, that's an example or manifestation of a strong character and proper ethics in complying with the oath of office that a judge takes. And that is to show restraint, to follow the law, even though it may be contrary to the judge's personal view.
Mm-hmm. Very good. You've been practicing law for a number of years. And I'm just wondering, how do you grow professionally? What steps do you take to grow professionally?
Try to do the right thing every day. I try to do the little things right. And if I do the little things right, hopefully the bigger issues and decisions will fall into place. Someone told me many years ago that a priority is a pre-decision. So if you come to the crossroads of a decision, you don't want to sit there and stumble and get knotted up and bite your fingernails about what do I do? Which path do I take? Because if you've inculcated in yourself the right sense of ethics and priorities, you don't hesitate at the crossroads. You know what the right decision is and you do it without hesitation. So I think that's an important part of it. I would also borrow from the mission statement that your excellent department has stated about servant leadership. I think the word servant is key. It starts with the mindset of being a servant. It's not self-focused, it's other-focused. The servant, I think, models humility, not pride. And if we start with the mindset of a servant, then I think maybe the qualities of good leadership are able to follow. On the other hand, if my focus begins with the ideas, I want to be a leader, I believe pride will dominate the mindset, and the idea of serving others may never materialize. I hope that responsive to your question, sir.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. And I have one more question for you, and but I did want to give students the opportunity to ask maybe one question or two questions. So students, I'm going to ask my question in just a moment. So in the chat box, if you have a question, maybe the judge could take two questions from students if we have time. But so go ahead and type in your questions and he'll look at those and he'll just pick one himself, whatever he would like to answer. But my last question for you would be, what advice would you give to students who desire to model good leadership in their profession? And you've touched on this in some ways already, but just giving them some advice when it comes to good leadership, modeling that in their profession, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the fact they're part of your program already tells me they're off to the right path. So as long as they stick to the path they're on, they're moving in the right direction. I would say do what you want to do what you're passionate about. Be passionate about it. Care about what you do. Do your very best. And I know so many people today who do not enjoy what they do. So when you find the thing or the pursuit, the profession, whatever it may be, that you enjoy, be focused, be passionate, be diligent. I've been in a Bible study group for, I did not become a Christian until after law school. So when I did, I've been in a Bible study group, and that has helped me stay in the Word and stay focused with a band of brothers that we hold each other accountable. So I think we're all influenced by the world, probably more than we recognize, or certainly than we care to admit. So being intentional about being in the Word, about being in a group of fellow believers who can hold you accountable, I think that's an important part of the equation. Life is too difficult. It can be very lonely. And if you think you can do it on your own, you'll be in for much regret. So surround yourself with strong people, people you believe in, people who uphold you, and stay true to yourself. Never sell your character or integrity for one cause or one case or one thing. Maintain it and be strong and be passionate about what you do.
Very good. Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you. Great advice. Any questions from the students? We have just a few more minutes left. Any questions in the chat box?
We do have one question someone submitted through the Q&A. It says, how can a judge or legal practitioner serve God in their profession?
Well, I know there's a joke out there that you can't be a member of the legal profession and be a Christian, but I don't think that's true. And one of the mentors I had early on, when I came to the practice of law, was a very strong Christian in the Greenville community, and I got to know him well, and he was a mentor. He died many years ago, but he meant a great deal to me. And he led me to believe, both through his teaching and how he modeled and lived his life, that it's very easy. It's not difficult. And I'll end it by giving you an example of one of Shakespeare's plays. I think the guy's name was Dick the Butcher, if I remember correctly. It's been years since I studied this, but the line is, first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. Well, that's been interpreted as simply a slap on the legal community that lawyers are a bunch of lowlifes and not worthy of respect because they have no character, whatever the pejorative description may be at the time. But the reality is, in that part of the play, there was an effort to overthrow society, to overthrow the government. And those who were rebelling understood that what stood in the path of taking over the government was the law. And they had to overthrow the law, and specifically the guardians of the law. So to be successful in their revolt and to upset civil society and take over, they had to kill the legal community. So I would take a measure of pride in being a lawyer and standing up for the Constitution, standing up for our founding principles, and the freedoms and notions of equality under law that we all want to work hard to achieve and to continue to work toward. Realizing that we're not perfect, we're human, we live in an imperfect world, but we have a constitutional structure that moves us in the right direction. And I would embrace that, and I'm proud to be a member of the legal profession.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. Maybe just one more question, and then we'll call it a day. We want to respect your time. I think several have been submitted.
You'll have to relay them, Dr. Bryant, because I don't see any on my screen.
That's
Okay.
all the questions. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. There is one more question. What are some example of cases where you had to rule in accordance with a law you disagreed with? How do issues of constitutionality play into that?
I have ruled in a number of cases where someone who is guilty, I've authored an opinion to reverse their conviction. And you would think, well, how can you do that? If you know the person's guilty, how could you ever do that? And let me tell you how that plays out. The law has two goals. The two goals of the law fundamentally are, number one, to ascertain the truth. And number two, to find the truth through a process that is fair. Now, many times, finding the truth and a fair process coexist. They're not at odds with each other. But there are times, frequently, when those goals are in conflict. You know what the truth is, the person's guilty, but the process is not fair. So what does our constitutional framework dictate the result in that situation? And the answer is our founders and our founding principles and our Constitution and presumption of innocence and the various rights we have in the Bill of Rights favor a fair process over the ascertainment of truth. And let me give you an example to close out. And it may be a silly example, but it illustrates the point. Assume that the police have a suspicion that someone on a block is selling drugs. They don't go through any further investigation. They don't get a warrant. They just go from house to house and kick in doors. And at the end of the street, they kick in the door and they finally find the drugs and the drug dealer. Well, that's the truth. They found the drug dealer. But my sense in telling you that story is you have an unsettling feeling about the fairness of it. And your unsettling feeling is telling you the answers that our Constitution requires. The fairness of the process is of paramount importance in our justice system. So truth may conflict with fairness. And we have said long ago, and our oath requires us to follow the law, that when those goals are in conflict, the certainty of a fair process trumps the ascertainment of the truth. I hope that's responsive to the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great response. I'll tell you, our students have learned a lot today. We're so thankful that you spent time with us, and we really appreciate it. And anytime you're in the Charleston area, please know you're welcome at Charleston Southern. We would love to have you drop in and visit.
Dr. Bryant, thank you, sir. It's been my pleasure to be with you and your students. I wish you all the very best.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
You too, sir. Thank you.